Mira Vaughn jiggled the handle of the cabin door, her breath coming out in white puffs in the freezing night air. "No, no, no," she muttered, pressing her forehead against the wooden surface. She had only stepped outside for a moment to bring in more firewood, and now the door was locked tight, her phone and keys taunting her from inside. The remote rental cabin nestled deep in the Colorado mountains had seemed like the perfect getaway until now. Snowflakes swirled around her, and the temperature was dropping fast. The nearest town was miles away, and she wasn't about to trudge through knee-deep snow in nothing but her thick sweater, leggings, and socks. She hugged herself, shivering, and scanned the darkness. The only other cabin nearby was a massive, modern lodge just up the hill, its floor-to-ceiling windows glowing softly with golden light. Maybe whoever lived there could help. With no other choice, she trudged through the snow, her teeth chattering as she knocked on the heavy wooden door. Silence. Then footsteps. The door swung open, revealing a tall man with dark waves of hair falling over his forehead and intense blue eyes that flicked over her quickly. He wore a fitted gray sweater and dark jeans, his presence commanding and effortlessly elegant, his brow furrowed. "Are you okay?" Mira let out a nervous laugh, rubbing her arms. "Not really. I just got locked out of my cabin and my phone is inside. I was hoping maybe you had a spare blanket or come inside," he said without hesitation, stepping back to let her in. The warmth hit her instantly, and she let out a breath of relief as she took in the space vaulted ceilings, a roaring fireplace, sleek furniture that looked expensive but still cozy. Whoever this man was, he clearly had money. "Thank you so much," she said, rubbing her hands together. "I promise I'm not some crazy person, just an idiot who forgot to check if the door locks automatically." The man's lips quirked slightly, his gaze lingering on her before he extended a hand. "Lachlan Hayes," she shook it, surprised by how warm his grip was. "Mira Vaughn." "Nice to meet you, Lachlan, and also sorry for barging in like this." He gestured toward the fire. "Sit, warm up." She hesitated for a second before sinking into the plush armchair near the hearth. The fire crackled, sending waves of heat over her frozen skin. Lachlan disappeared down the hall and returned with a thick blanket, draping it over her shoulders. "How long were you outside?" "Not too long," she admitted, "but long enough to feel like a human icicle," he exhaled, shaking his head. "You're lucky, it's going to drop below freezing tonight." She tucked the blanket tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. His presence was almost overwhelming, the kind that made it impossible to ignore him. There was something about him, an air of control, of quiet confidence that made her heart beat a little faster. "Are you staying at the rental for long?" he asked, crossing his arms. "Just a week," she said. "Needed a break from everything." His gaze sharpened slightly. "Everything?" Mira let out a soft laugh. "Work, life, the general chaos of existing." Lachlan nodded, as if he understood that better than most. A comfortable silence settled between them before she cleared her throat. "So, do you live here full-time?" He hesitated for a brief moment, then nodded. "For now." Something about the way he said it made her curiosity spark, but before she could ask, he glanced toward the window. "It's too late to get a locksmith. You can stay here tonight if you want." Mira blinked. "Oh, I don't want to impose. You'd rather freeze." His voice carried a hint of amusement, but there was something else, too something firm, as if he wasn't going to let her argue. She bit her lip, considering. Staying in a stranger's house overnight wasn't exactly on her vacation itinerary, but the alternative was spending the night outside or breaking a window to get back into her rental. "Are you sure?" she asked. Lachlan nodded once. "I'll set up the guest room." As he walked away, she exhaled, trying to make sense of the strange turn her night had taken. A locked door had led her straight to the mysterious, devastatingly handsome man next door, and something told her this was just the beginning. Mira followed the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee into the spacious kitchen the next morning, her borrowed socks whispering over the warm, hardwood floors. The fire had burned low overnight, but the heat still lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the frost-glazed windows. Lachlan stood at the counter, his broad shoulders relaxed as he poured 2 cups of coffee. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his fingers through it absent-mindedly. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, glancing at her with unreadable eyes. "Morning," he said, handing her a cup. She wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic, inhaling deeply. "Morning. Thanks for letting me crash here last night. I owe you." He leaned against the counter, studying her for a moment. "You don't owe me anything, Mira." Something about the way he said her name sent a small, unexpected shiver down her spine. She took a careful sip of her coffee, grateful for the distraction. "I should probably head back and see if the rental company can send someone to unlock my cabin." Lachlan set his own cup down. "I can take care of it." She lifted an eyebrow. "You have a locksmith on speed dial." A flicker of something crossed his expression. Amusement, maybe, but it was gone before she could place it. Something like that. She hesitated, torn between curiosity and the growing awareness that there was more to him than he let on. But before she could ask, he was already pulling on a sleek black coat, grabbing a set of keys from the counter. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you back inside." The walk to her cabin was brief, the snow crunching beneath their boots as the early morning sun cast long shadows through the trees. Mira's breath curled in the crisp air, her gaze flickering to Lachlan as he moved with quiet confidence beside her. When they reached the door, he knelt, examining the lock with practiced ease. Within moments, he produced a small tool from his pocket, and with a precise movement, the lock clicked open. Mira's mouth fell open. "Hold on. Did you just—" He rose smoothly, slipping the tool back into his coat. "It's an easy lock to pick," she stared at him. "That's not an explanation. Who just knows how to do that?" Lachlan's lips twitched slightly. "People with experience." "Experience in what? Breaking into cabins?" He didn't answer, simply pushed the door open and gestured for her to go inside. Mira stepped over the threshold, her mind racing. The mystery surrounding him only deepened. He had the presence of someone used to control, someone who moved through the world on his own terms. And now, apparently, he also had the skills to bypass locks like it was second nature. She turned to face him. "You're not just some guy living in a cabin, are you?" His gaze held hers for a beat too long. "No, I'm not." The air between them shifted. She could feel it, something unspoken crackling in the space that separated them. But before she could press further, he stepped back onto the porch. "If you need anything, you know where to find me," he said, his voice quieter now. And then, just like that, he was gone, disappearing down the trail toward his own cabin. Mira exhaled, rubbing a hand over her forehead. What had she just walked into? The day passed in a blur of attempted distractions, reading on the couch, making herself tea, even stepping outside for a short walk, but her thoughts kept circling back to Lachlan. There was something about him that pulled at her, something that didn't quite add up. By late afternoon, she gave in to her curiosity. She wasn't the type to leave questions unanswered. Bundling up against the cold, she made her way back to his cabin, her boots sinking into the thick snow. When she reached his door, she hesitated for just a second before knocking. Footsteps sounded from inside. The door opened, and there he was, his expression unreadable as he took her in. "You're back." She folded her arms. "I have questions." He leaned against the frame, his gaze steady. "I figured you might." Mira wasn't sure what she expected, a brush-off, maybe, or some vague, non-committal answer. But instead, after a long pause, Lachlan stepped aside. "Come in." She stepped inside, her pulse quickening. This time, she wasn't just walking into his cabin. She was stepping into whatever secret he wasn't telling her. Mira stepped inside Lachlan's cabin, the scent of cedar wood and something darker, something distinctly him, wrapping around her like an invisible tether. The fire had been stoked again, casting flickering shadows across the modern yet rugged interior. His presence filled the space effortlessly, an extension of the man himself, controlled, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Lachlan watched her, his gaze unreadable, waiting. She exhaled, crossing her arms. "All right. You're clearly not just some guy living in the mountains, picking locks like it's a casual hobby. Who are you?" For a moment, she thought he might sidestep the question, but instead he moved toward the sleek bar cart near the window, pouring himself a drink. The crystal clinked as he set the bottle down. He didn't offer her one, as if he knew she wasn't here for pleasantries. "I own a security firm," he said finally, his voice calm, measured. Mira blinked. "That's not what I expected." He took a sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving hers. And what did you expect? Well, considering you can pick locks like someone in a heist movie, I was leaning toward international spy. A flicker of amusement crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant. Not quite. She studied him, the sharp lines of his face, the way he carried himself like a man who had lived through things most people couldn't imagine. Security firm, she echoed. The kind that installs fancy alarms for rich people, or the kind that handles other things. Lachlan set his glass down with deliberate care. The kind that handles everything. The weight behind his words sent a shiver down her spine. There were layers to him, one she wasn't sure she wanted to peel back too quickly. She hesitated, then said, "So you're not just hiding away in the mountains for fun?" His jaw tightened slightly. No, something in his tone made her pulse pick up. Whatever had driven him here, it wasn't simple. Mira shifted her weight, keeping her voice light even as her curiosity deepened. "Let me guess, you pissed off the wrong people and now you're laying low, or maybe a job went wrong." Lachlan's gaze sharpened. "You have a habit of making assumptions." She lifted a shoulder. "It's a survival skill." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackling fire. Then, finally, he exhaled. "I walked away," he said, "from everything." His words were quiet, but they carried a finality that made her stomach tighten. Mira didn't move, her instincts warring with her desire to know more. "Why?" Lachlan's gaze flickered toward the window, as if he were seeing something far beyond the snow-covered trees. "Because I built something that became bigger than me. And when you create something like that, eventually, people want to use it for things you never intended." She swallowed, the weight of his words settling over her. "So you left your own company." "I left the world I built." The way he said it, as if he had burned every bridge behind him, sent a hum of unease through her. Not fear, never that, but something else. A warning that she had stepped into something deeper than she realized. Mira studied him, the lines etched into his face, the restraint in his posture. Whatever had happened, it had cost him. And yet, despite the mystery surrounding him, she didn't feel the urge to run. Instead, she stepped closer. "You don't seem like the kind of man who just walks away from things," she said carefully. His jaw clenched, and for a second she thought he might shut down completely. But then, his gaze locked onto hers and something in the air shifted. "I didn't walk," he murmured. "I ran." The confession, raw and unexpected, sent a pulse of something electric between them. Mira's breath caught. "And now," Lachlan's hand curled into a loose fist at his side. "Now I wait to see if the past will let me go." Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. This wasn't just about a man escaping his career. It was about something much bigger. She should have let it go, should have thanked him for his honesty and walked away. But instead, she found herself saying, "And if it doesn't?" Lachlan's gaze darkened, his voice dropping to something almost dangerous. "Then I stop waiting." Heat curled in Mira's stomach, a mixture of adrenaline and something far more dangerous. She had stepped into his world, whether she meant to or not, and she wasn't sure she wanted to leave. Mira wasn't sure what pulled her in, first the weight of Lachlan's words or the way he held himself, as if he were bracing for something inevitable. Either way, she wasn't stepping back. The firelight flickered across his face, sharpening the angles of his jaw, the quiet storm in his eyes. Whatever he had been waiting for, whatever past threatened to catch up with him, she could feel it pressing in. She should have been cautious. Instead, she reached for the truth. "What happens if running isn't enough?" she asked. Lachlan's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted just slightly. "Then I make sure I'm the one in control when it finds me." It wasn't a threat. It was a simple fact. Mira's pulse quickened. She had never been drawn to danger, not in the reckless way some people were. But this wasn't about danger. It was about something deeper. A man who had built an empire walked away from it and now stood at the edge of something unknown. And somehow she was part of it. "So that's why you're here," she murmured. "Not hiding, waiting." Lachlan's gaze held hers. "Waiting for the right reason to stop running." The air between them tightened, thick with something unspoken but unmistakable. Mira's breath caught. "And have you found it?" For the first time since she met him, Lachlan hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but as if he was weighing the cost of honesty. Then, deliberately, he reached out, his fingers brushing against her wrist, not demanding, not forcing. just a touch one that sent heat surging through her, as if everything inside her recognized it before her mind could catch up. "I think I have," he said. The words settled deep, threading through something she hadn't realized was already unraveling inside her. Before she could think, before doubt could slip in, she stepped closer, closing the space between them. Lachlan didn't move away. If anything, his breath deepened, his restraint visible in the tension that rippled through his frame. Mira tilted her chin up, searching his face, the controlled energy beneath his calm. "You don't seem like a man who lets things happen by accident." A muscle in his jaw flexed. "I don't." Her fingers curled slightly, aching to move against the fabric of his sweater to press into the warmth beneath. "Then tell me this isn't intentional," Lachlan exhaled, slow and measured. "I can't." And then finally he moved, not rushed, not reckless but sure. His hand lifted, fingers skimming along her jaw, tilting her face upward. The fire crackled behind them, but the real heat was here, in the space that no longer existed between them. Mira barely had time to take a breath before his lips met hers. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was a declaration, one that stole the air from her lungs and sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold outside. Lachlan pulled her closer, his grip firm but careful, as if he was holding something he hadn't allowed himself to want in a long time. And Mira was done pretending she wasn't just as caught in this as he was. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his sweater, anchoring herself as warmth flooded through her. The world outside didn't exist, not the snow, not the past he had left behind, not the questions she should still be asking. It was just them. When they finally pulled apart, Lachlan didn't let her go. His forehead rested against hers, their breaths tangled together. Mira swallowed hard, her voice softer than before. "What happens now?" Lachlan's thumb traced the edge of her jaw, his voice steady. "Now I stop waiting." And for the first time since she met him, she knew exactly what that meant. He wasn't running anymore, and neither was she. Mira curled her fingers against Lachlan's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. The firelight flickered around them, casting shifting shadows against the cabin walls. The weight of his admission still hung in the air between them. He wasn't running anymore. And somehow that change had everything to do with her. She pulled back just enough to meet his gaze, searching for uncertainty, for hesitation. There was none. Only unwavering certainty in the way he held her, as if this moment had been inevitable from the start. A slow exhale left her lips. "You don't do things halfway, do you?" Lachlan's hand settled at the nape of her neck, his touch grounding. "I never have." Something about the quiet conviction in his voice sent warmth curling through her. It would be so easy to get lost in him. But the questions still lingered beneath the surface, pressing against the edges of her thoughts. She traced her fingers along the edge of his sweater, her voice softer now. "What does this mean for you?" Lachlan's thumb brushed against her cheek, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver down her spine. "It means I'm done waiting for life to happen to me. I know what I want. And I don't intend to waste time pretending otherwise." Her breath hitched, a mixture of anticipation and something deeper, something terrifying in its intensity. "And what if I haven't figured out what I want yet?" His lips quirked, not quite a smile, but something close. "Then I'll wait for you to catch up." The simplicity of his words sent her heart into freefall. There was no pressure, no demand, just certainty. She swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. "I don't want to be another thing you have to walk away from." A shadow passed through his gaze, something raw and unguarded. "You won't be," he said. "I walked away from a life that didn't belong to me anymore." His fingers tightened slightly where they rested against her skin. "This is different." Mira wasn't sure how to respond to that, wasn't sure she trusted herself to. So instead, she let herself lean into him, just for a moment longer. But reality had a way of creeping back in, no matter how much she wanted to stay in this perfect, fragile moment. A sharp knock on the cabin door shattered the silence. Lachlan's expression hardened instantly. His grip on her waist tightened instinctively before he pulled away, his entire demeanor shifting into something unreadable. Mira's pulse kicked up. "Are you expecting someone?" He shook his head, already moving toward the door with the kind of controlled precision that made her stomach tighten. He didn't hesitate as he pulled it open. A tall man stood on the porch, bundled against the cold, his posture rigid. His sharp gaze flicked to Mira before settling on Lachlan. "We need to talk." Lachlan didn't move. "Not here." The man's jaw tightened. "There's been movement." Mira's stomach twisted. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. Lachlan exhaled slowly, but his expression remained unreadable. "Give me a minute." The man hesitated, then gave a sharp nod before stepping back into the cold. Mira didn't wait for Lachlan to say anything before she spoke. "What's going on?" Lachlan closed the door, his posture still tense. "It doesn't concern you." Her eyes narrowed. "So now I'm supposed to just pretend I didn't hear that." He ran a hand through his hair, his control fraying at the edges for the first time since she'd met him. "Mira, no," she cut him off. "Don't do that. Don't shut me out now." Something in his expression shifted just briefly before he exhaled. "There are people who don't want me to stay gone." Her stomach turned. "And now they've found you." Lachlan didn't answer immediately, but his silence was answer enough. Mira inhaled sharply. "So what happens now?" His gaze locked onto hers, steady despite the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Now I handle it." She shook her head. "You don't have to do this alone." His fingers curled at his sides. "I do." "No, you don't," she insisted. "You just think you do." Lachlan studied her for a long moment, something unreadable passing through his gaze. Then, finally, he reached for her hand, his grip firm but careful. "I don't want you caught in the crossfire," he admitted quietly. Mira squeezed his fingers. "Then don't push me away." For the first time, something in his posture eased just slightly. Lachlan exhaled, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "All right." And just like that, she knew whatever came next, they would face it together. Lachlan took Mira's hand and led her toward the fireplace, his grip steady but charged with something deeper than urgency. His world was shifting, and for the first time in years, he wasn't facing it alone. The fire cast golden light across the room, illuminating the sharp edges of his expression. He was always in control, always calculating his next move, but right now, he was letting her see beyond that. Mira kept her gaze locked on him, refusing to let the gravity of the situation shake her resolve. "You said you weren't running anymore. Does that mean you're staying?" Lachlan's fingers tightened slightly around hers before he exhaled, measured and deliberate. "It means I'm done letting the past dictate my future." Her heart pounded. "Then what's the next move?" He studied her, the weight of unspoken words settling between them. "You're a part of this now. Are you sure that's what you want?" Mira didn't hesitate. "I didn't ask to be, but I'm not leaving." That was all he needed to hear. Lachlan lifted her hand, pressing a brief, warm kiss to her knuckles before releasing her. He moved toward the door, unlocking it with a sharp motion before stepping outside. The man who had come looking for him was waiting just beyond the porch, his breath curling in the cold air. Lachlan's presence alone was enough to command the moment, and Mira stayed near the doorway, listening as they spoke in hushed tones. Whatever was coming, it wasn't distant anymore. It was here. When Lachlan re-entered the cabin, there was no hesitation in his movements. He locked the door behind him, his expression unreadable as he turned to face her. "It's time to stop waiting," he said. Mira's pulse raced. "Then let's do it together." Lachlan reached for her again, this time with no distance between them. His hand slid against the curve of her waist, pulling her close with deliberate intent. "You don't understand what that means yet." Her fingers pressed against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. "Then show me." For a moment, he didn't speak. He only looked at her, as if memorizing the way her determination burned just as fiercely as his own. Then his lips brushed over hers, not with hesitation, but with certainty. She was here, and she wasn't leaving. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of quiet preparation. Lachlan made calls behind closed doors, his voice low and precise. Mira didn't push for details, but she could feel the shift in the air. Whatever had been looming over him was no longer a shadow in the distance, it was something he was ready to face. She spent the time learning more about the man who had, somehow, become the center of her world. Lachlan didn't open up easily, but when he did, it was with the kind of honesty that left no room for doubt. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she asked the question that had been lingering in the back of her mind. "What happens after this?" Lachlan turned to her, his expression softer than usual. After what? After you face whatever's coming, she said. After you stop waiting. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Then I start building something new. Mira's breath caught. And where do I fit into that? Lachlan didn't hesitate. Wherever you want to be. The sincerity in his voice sent warmth spreading through her chest. She hadn't planned on this. She hadn't expected to find a man who made her feel like she belonged in something bigger than herself. But now she couldn't imagine walking away, and she wasn't going to. The confrontation Lachlan had been preparing for came swiftly. It wasn't a dramatic battle or a violent clash, it was a conversation with consequences. The people who had been searching for him wanted him back in the world he had left behind, but Lachlan had already made his choice. Mira stood beside him as he shut that door for good. She watched as he walked away from the past with nothing but certainty in his stride, and when he turned to her, offering his hand, she took it without hesitation. The cabin became their sanctuary, but it wasn't their future. One evening, as they stood beneath a sky full of stars, Lachlan pulled her close and pressed a kiss to her temple. "Come with me," he murmured. Mira smiled against his shoulder. "I already have." But that wasn't what he meant. He stepped back, reaching into his coat pocket, and when he lowered himself to one knee, Mira's breath hitched. Lachlan met her gaze, steady and sure. "I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it," he said. "I don't want to wait anymore. Marry me." The words sent a rush of emotion surging through her. There was no uncertainty, no hesitation. Mira nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." Lachlan rose, sliding the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. There was no past to run from anymore. Only the future they would build together. The wedding was quiet, intimate, a moment just for them. There was no need for extravagance, no need for anything beyond the certainty they had found in each other. As they stood beneath the golden glow of sunset, exchanging vows that held more weight than any promises before, Mira knew with absolute certainty this was where she was meant to be. Lachlan's fingers tightened around hers as he murmured the final words that sealed their future. And when he kissed her, it wasn't just the beginning of something new. It was everything.